Good afternoon, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to what is the second of our Change Starts Together conferences. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome so many of you again this evening. And I have no doubt that this is going to be a very important and information-packed evening for you. The agenda has been put together and we are tonight going to be hosted by Graham Smith. Graham is a member of our new ED&I advisory group, so you will see Graham shortly. There is an apology from Ben Kaji. Ben, for those that were able to join us in the first of these meetings, is unable to join due to schedule clashes in relation to his involvement with the BBC in the Winter Olympics. But I have no doubt that Graham will be a fine host for us this evening. You'll also hear from several members of the ED&I advisory group talking through what is a very important month, but also what is undoubtedly a really important program for us as we navigate the next few weeks and months together. The advisory group is still relatively new in place and has supported us enormously in the first few weeks of its involvement. And primarily this evening, they will reference the new framework that we've been developing and will be sharing with you all in due course. The group is absolutely there to support us all, to challenge us all, and ultimately to make sure that we are in a better and stronger place in hockey in England. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome some of those to you this evening. Before I do pass to Graham, I'm going to stop now and introduce Hollie Pearn-Webb, captain of the women's team, who would like to say a few words.
I've grown up playing hockey along with members of the LGBTQ plus community, and I'm incredibly grateful that I have because it's something that's just been incredibly normal and welcomed and valued. I think in the teams that I've been part of, I still think there's a long way to go, and I don't think we're perfect, and I still think we can do things to make our sport and our environment more accessible. So I'm not saying we're perfect, but yeah, I think if we bring as many people as we can along, and as I said before, kind of stamp out anything that's not deemed acceptable and use the profile and platforms that we have as individuals and as a squad, then there's some of the parts that we can play. So one thing as a squad in the Tokyo cycle that we're incredibly passionate about and something that we wanted to work on was just being good people, learning about our history and helping communities that had suffered. So we hadn't before been allowed to wear a rainbow armband, but whilst we were out at the Olympics in the preparation camp, it got announced that we would be allowed to wear one if we wanted to. Knowing the squad and the conversations we'd had over the cycle, I knew it would be something that the squad would want me to do and support me to do. So then it became a way of how could we get a rainbow armband over there in time for the games. So it's something incredibly important to the whole squad. We as a squad want to represent as many people as we can and just be allies to the LGBTQ plus community. So as a squad and as GB hockey players, we're in such a privileged position to be able to play for our country and be role models for a lot of other people. And I think part of that comes the responsibility to represent some underprivileged and minority groups. And as I said before, I think our squad are incredibly passionate about that. And we just want to make it really clear that our sport is for everyone. Everyone is welcome. It doesn't matter on who you are and who you love, and everyone is equally welcome in our sport. And actually the difference of people is what makes our squad incredibly strong. And we just wanted to send that message out there to the sporting community. I think sport has got a huge role to play and has played a role. As I mentioned, kind of we're in a really privileged position and we're role models. And I think there has been a huge difference between Rio Olympics and the 5 years in Tokyo, but there's still so much further to go to make everyone feel accepted. And I think, as I said before, we have a responsibility to play some of that role. And hopefully by Paris, we'll have made another huge step forward by just normalising conversations. I think as a sport, a women's hockey squad, we're kind of one step ahead. We're used to meeting lots of different people and playing with different people, and therefore we've got a role to stamp out anything that isn't acceptable and that we don't seem to be right. So yes, we have a role, yes, it's important, but there's still a huge way to go. It doesn't matter if you're part of that community or not. Being an ally, being a friend is incredibly important, and the responsibility that I take very seriously, and I think a lot of people in our squad do. So yeah, it's a privilege and an honour, and something that I'm very happy to do and should be doing. I think obviously the LGBTQ plus History Month is a great platform to highlight some of these issues, but yeah, it shouldn't be a month. It should be something that's in our conscious and we should be trying to help with throughout the whole year. I think one thing we all can do is educate ourselves a little bit, and that involves going out there and sourcing some information. It also involves speaking to people and asking questions, and just educating yourself a little bit in terms of what are the things that people in that community face every day, which you wouldn't, and kind of trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes to then really understand in terms of how you can help them and how you can make your community more accessible to them. So I think that's a huge one. And then I think another one is just stamp out anything that isn't acceptable in the moment. It's not okay to just let someone say something or do something and just ignore it. I think we all have a responsibility to stand up and defend what is right and what is wrong. So I think that's something else that we can all do.
Hi everyone, how are you doing? I'm Graham Smith. It's lovely to meet you all virtually. I'm sorry that I couldn't get myself to Beijing. You're stuck with me for today. So I'm part of the advisory group, and it's honestly been such an honour for me to be part of this team. I've played hockey since I was 11. I grew up in Scotland, played for London Wayfarers. We won the 2009 trophy, dug out my top for today from 2009. Angela's told me it's off-brand. It's a constant reminder that we missed National League promotion 2 years in a row by 1 point, so we can talk about that later. I'm really moved by what Hollie said there. You know, as a gay man myself, I remember growing up and playing hockey in Scotland and in London and around in England, and just often being the only person that was gay in the team. And I think we've come so far. And I think maybe if you watched Hollie's video, I cannot tell you how far it goes to see that team wear that rainbow armband and on the stage like the Olympics. Like, visibility is just so important. And I'm just thrilled to kind of, combine everything I've learned from being gay myself. I do a lot of LGBTQ plus within my company, and combine that with a love of hockey. I still play hockey over here in New York. And if anyone's in New York, do get in touch, because I'd love to say hi and chat about all the great things that are happening in England. So let's continue to move along. I want to talk to you a little bit more about, what we're going to be doing today. So today we're actually going to talk more about LGBTQ plus, because in the UK right now it is LGBTQ History Month, and Ella from the group is going to come in and tell us a little bit more of that in a second. And then what we also want to do is start to kind of, lower the altitude a little bit on this ED&I framework. So we're going to be talking today, after we've kind of chatted about LGBTQ plus History Month, we'll then come on to talk about the different areas of the ED&I framework. Now, as we continue to kind of think about all this and kind of bring it into our clubs and just ideate and hopefully be inspired about what it is you could do, let's just remember you've just got to start from where you are. So I'm sure that there'll be content from today that might not feel relevant, but just, we're around to help you find your simple starting point. And again, once we get you through this EDI framework, we'll talk about more of what happens next at the end. But as we do that today, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. What we have committed to is we're going to be a little bit quicker this time to get the question responses from the, up online as quick as we can. So we do acknowledge we were a wee bit slow there from the first round, but we do, your questions and your feedback are really, really important to making this work. So we'd love you to continue to post your questions. You can do so in the chat. If you've got a problem, reach out to the moderator. And if you still have a problem, you can always email the email that's on the website and at any time to come through. So with that said, I think we can now, let's move on. And I think we'll move into kind of our first section, which is to really talk about LGBTQ plus History Month. And I will hand over to Ella to take us through that.
Thanks so much, Graham, and thank you everybody for being here today and being part of the conversation. So like Graham said, my name's Ella Slade. My pronouns are they, them. I play for the London Royals, so I've got my London Royals hockey club t-shirt on today. So I think lots of us from the advisory group were all whipping out our kits and whatever and making sure that we were on brand. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about LGBTQ plus History Month. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So what is LGBTQ plus History Month? Because obviously we have Pride Month that tends to happen in June. And then we have this additional month, LGBTQ plus History Month. So this is a really key month to talk about, to share, to learn all about the history of the LGBTQ plus community, to hear about our identities, our stories, our rights, and as they've changed over the years. So why does it happen in February? So some of you might be familiar with a piece of legislation called Section 28. So Section 28 came in the late 80s and lasted through the 90s and was finally overturned in 2003. And this legislation basically banned topics regarding the LGBTQ plus community from being discussed in schools. So what that basically meant is we have a huge chunk of society, including myself, that went to school in that time, that talking about the community was not allowed. So, you know, we grew up not hearing anything about the LGBTQ plus community at all. And that can be really dangerous, but can also mean that a big part of our history is somewhat erased and we don't know about. So that's why it's so important that we continue to learn about the community and about our history. This year is also super special. So in June, it will mark 50 years since the first Pride March in London. So I know there's lots of exciting things that will be happening later on in the year, so stay tuned for that. But yes, a very exciting time. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the LGBTQ plus community and its place within sport and LGBTQ plus inclusion in sport as well. So why representation and visibility matters. I could say it till I'm blue in the face. It is so, so important. And, you know, there's that famous quote that gets used quite a lot. You can't be what you can't see. You know, seeing out LGBTQ plus athletes, senior, you know, politicians, musicians, actors, anyone who is visible and is well known and identifies as LGBTQ plus is phenomenal and acts as a huge role model for the community, so that they can see, you know what, if this person can do this, maybe I can do that too. And like I mentioned earlier about the whole Section 28, because LGBTQ plus topics weren't discussed at school, that meant that we were essentially kind of stripped of any form of role model growing up. So relating it straight back to hockey, visible role models such as Helen and Kate Richardson-Walsh have been fantastic in terms of us seeing LGBTQ plus athletes playing at the Olympics, representing our country and doing just the most amazing stuff, and knowing that they are part of the community as well. And not only part of the community, are vocal, are standing up when are talking about inclusion, exactly like Hollie was saying in the video earlier. Allies play such a huge role in this as well. And my club, the London Royals Hockey Club, we're an LGBTQ plus hockey club, and we all went absolutely wild when we saw the Rainbow Captain Band in Tokyo in the summer. It was just fantastic to see, and really just meant a lot to us that actually our rights are important and our lives are important. So that's what it means when we see allyship, when we see people stand up. So to go into a bit more detail then, so around supporting trans and non-binary players. So England Hockey has a trans policy. It can be downloaded from the website, and it details basically how trans players fit into the realm of hockey, and some guidance along there. Currently, the general gist, and this is me massively paraphrasing a document that's a few pages long, but the general gist is that trans players can play for the team which aligns to their gender identity. So a trans woman can play for the women's team, a trans man can play for the men's team. However, this leaves a big gap. So this does not work currently for non-binary players. So what I mean by non-binary, so I myself identify as non-binary, and the way that I like to define it is that I don't identify as male or female. Neither of those identities fit with me, so I identify outside of that binary. And what that means for many players is many players do not feel comfortable playing for gendered sport, so playing for a men's team or a women's team. However, you'd think that within hockey, we have mixed hockey, which is fantastic. So that surely is a more accessible way for non-binary athletes to play. However, currently, we still have restrictions because we still have rules in terms of X number of men and X number of women on the pitch at any one point in a mixed game. So we are aware of these kind of issues and these areas for improvement. So one of the things that we're going to be working on going forwards is reviewing that trans policy, looking at how we can update it to make sure that we're including non-binary players in that, looking at things like our guidance around mixed hockey as well, and really just making it much more inclusive. Not all non-binary players will only want to play mixed. I myself, I'm the women's club captain at the Royals and I'm very comfortable playing for the women's team, but that's not the case for everybody. So this just goes back to us wanting to make hockey the most inclusive sport for everybody. Some other things to have a look at, resources. So Pride Sport do have non-binary guidance for sport as a whole. So it's definitely worth checking that out and having a look and seeing what we can learn from there. Also, many of you probably are part of clubs that have clubhouses or maybe own your own clubhouse. Please have a look at things such as gender neutral changing facilities and gender neutral restrooms. Even if this is just a single stall that somebody can use, it really makes it much more accessible for non-binary people to be able to access the sport. So we wanted to give you a few kind of takeaways and tips as well in terms of how you can make your club more LGBTQ plus inclusive. The first one is code of conduct. So have a look at your club's code of conduct if you have one. If you don't have one, get one. Have a look at your club's code of conduct and look at the description of discrimination. Does it call out a few specific things when it's talking about forms of discrimination? If it does, make sure that you're including sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as part of that. Use gender neutral language as much as possible. I'll touch on some more examples of that in a bit, but yeah, just really making sure that we're just neutralizing language as much as possible so everybody can see themselves and hear themselves being represented when you're speaking. The next one then, not making assumptions about players, how they identify or what their family makeup is like. You know, more and more people today probably have same-sex parents. So it's really important that we're using inclusive language and we're not making assumptions. The next one then, and again, links back perfectly to what Hollie mentioned at the beginning, is kind of stamping out that either negative or stereotypical kind of language or assumptions. So phrases like "that's so gay," very commonly used in schools. "You play like a girl," probably a bit of an older kind of stereotype or negative expression, but phrases like this, and obviously they iterate and there's many different forms, but really just need to be stamped out straight away. Even if things that could be kind of construed as like banter, oh, my background, you couldn't see my air quotes, my banter, it's so damaging, and it can be so damaging for LGBTQ plus players or people with LGBTQ plus family members. So it's really, really important that we make sure we are stamping out any form of language that could be construed as homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, misogynistic, any kind of offensive language. We really, really are stamping out straight away. The final one then is introduce yourself with your pronouns. As you noticed at the beginning, I introduced myself and said, my name's Ella, my pronouns are they, them. Often, certainly at our hockey club, we have lots of new members join, maybe not everybody's played together before, so we often start the session by just going around and introducing ourselves with our names. But from kind of about the last year or so, we've also added our pronouns. So we just go around and say our name and our pronouns, and it just makes it a much more welcoming environment and much more easily accessible so that people just know how to refer to one another. You know if someone goes by she, her, or knows if someone goes by he, him, or they, them, or any other pronouns. So it also makes it much more easy for people who are trans or non-binary to feel safe and comfortable sharing their own pronouns too. Great. So I now want to take a few minutes to share Sam's story. So Sam is part of our advisory group. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight because she is taking her son to play an exciting football match that couldn't be missed. Totally understandable. But I wanted to share, Sam's written a wonderful story about her experience and experience of her kids. And I just wanted to read it for you and share it with you today. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight, but wanted to share my experience with you as the mum of two young boys who both love their sport. As I was growing up and playing hockey to a high level, I was regularly exposed to negative comments about the lesbians who played high-level hockey, both within my club and for our country. In order to be myself, I ended up leaving hockey, chose another sport, and pursued my career to make lives better for other people. I was fortunate during this period of time to meet my wonderful wife. We were so grateful of the opportunity to play hockey together at work, and having seen attitudes starting to change, I returned to the sport I loved. As marriage was still not available, we became civil partners at the first opportunity, which was in 2006. We thought long and hard about whether to have a family. Would our choice to be parents be fair on our children? What world would they be entering? And were we being selfish, wanting to be parents? After much deliberation and research, I went on to give birth to two amazing boys who are now 13 and 10. But can I honestly say that they are always able to be their authentic self and openly share that they have two mums? Unfortunately, not. I cannot explain the number of times I've had to out myself or challenge forms, as in like application forms, to try and stop my child having to out their family and deal with the possible awkward questions or conversations with adults who are in responsible positions. To name a few, every introductory email I send to a new club or organisation, I find myself having to advise the recipient the boys have two mums and to save those awkward conversations or moments. I've tried not sending this information, and every time I find myself regretting it as I see the boys struggle through that first awkward conversation about their mum and dad. I have had the need to work with every setting the boys have ever been in, from nursery and even until very recently with the first forms I needed to fill out for secondary school. I've worked with another sport governing body after their new registration system for entry to their state-of-the-art venue would only accept one mum and one dad per child on their form. One of our children struggles with new situations. We may never know, but how much of this is exasperated by those early awkward conversations, his need to filter parts of his life, worried about fitting in and being accepted. Within hockey, the situation is also heightened as he is acutely aware of the additional difference of being from a state school. I ask all on the call to not only think about the child or person in front of them, but also their friends and families. Can you make your language and your forms more inclusive for all? Filtering is tiring. It causes anxiety, and I hope that together we can help everyone feel welcome and be their authentic self within hockey. I'm grateful to every one of you on this call, as you are here either wanting to learn or wanting to make a difference, and for that I personally thank you. Together as allies, you can be the difference.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna ask you to stay, so come back. I thought that was really interesting, and I know Sam couldn't be here, but those words were just really touching. And I think there was one point I'm thinking what you said for Sam, and that marriage wasn't available. And again, as I think a lot about what we're trying to do here, let's make sure when everyone comes to play hockey or watch hockey or umpire hockey or coach hockey, that there's no, there's a not in the world, right? So ultimately we're trying to create the most inclusive environment. And when someone says, marriage wasn't available, let's make sure that person doesn't, face any more challenges when all they're simply trying to do is play the sport or watch the sport or take part in the sport that they love. So that was something which certainly stood out for me there. Loved your LGBTQ plus history month. I loved it. Are the Royals up to anything? What are the Royals doing this month? What can we learn from you?
We're doing lots of stuff. We had a social earlier on in the month, which was great. We've got a few mixed training sessions coming up. So yeah, we've had lots of fun activities and stuff to mark the month. So yeah, it's been great.
Oh, I love that. And I think I love what you said as well, because we've got LGBTQ plus history month, right, was this February, and we've got June as Pride month. And something for us all to think about is, and we talk about this a lot at work, how do you keep the pride flag flying all year round, and again, I think all of us, right, you just have to go and walk down your local high street during Pride Month, or particularly in like kind of London, and you just see all the brands doing it, even H&M, and everyone's just putting up their rainbows, and it's called rainbow washing. But how do you extend that throughout the year? What are the other moments throughout the year to just show that you're continuously inclusive? And again, simple starts. If you haven't done anything for LGBTQ plus History Month, maybe there'll be other months throughout the year. We've got Black History Month, there's Women's History Month. There's lots of other opportunities for us to start showcasing our voices to make sure everyone feels welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also like the stuff that I mentioned earlier in terms of the tips to take away. It's great to get those stuff embedded into your clubs now, so that come June or come next year's LGBTQ plus History Month, you can say, right, from this last year, we've changed our code of conduct. We've now got gender neutral changing rooms, and we introduce ourselves with our pronouns. Like, they're super kind of nice, neat little takeaways that people can do that then means that you have stuff to talk about. So yeah.
Wonderful. And I'll put you on the spot. Is there a resource or is there an organization that you know off the top of your head that where people could reference? I know one that we use is the Human Rights Campaign. I've got some fantastic resources, and they might be in the US, but I think everyone could learn from them. So is there anything else that you would point people to? Yeah,
definitely Stonewall. Stonewall are doing and continue to do incredible work, and are very much about including the entire LGBTQ plus community. I know that we mentioned Pride Sport earlier as well, and they have some guidance specifically around non-binary inclusion. So yeah, I'd say the two of them. Mermaids, especially for supporting transgender youth, have lots of resources as well. So yeah, they'd be my kind of top few.
Okay, so the answers to those questions. Okay, so the first one was 13 million. So how many women and girls want to do more sports? 13 million. Wow. So if that's interesting, you think about the sizable opportunity for getting people back into the sport. How many boys and girls are sports club members? 29% boys and 17% girls. So I think that's actually what the majority voted with. How many disabled people are members? 15%. Actually, I think we all voted a lot lower there. So that number is higher than what we all voted. And then how many LGBTQ plus people find cultures intimidating? Wow, almost 50%. Wow, that's incredible. So that gives us a lot to think about as we go on, build our year ahead. So thank you for playing along. What we'll do now is we will bring Angela on, and we're going to now move into the framework. So we've talked about LGBTQ plus History Month, and for the next section, we're going to really dive into the framework and 4 different outcomes. And we're going to be working our way through our panel and explaining a little bit more about which each outcome is. And don't forget to keep posting your questions. And hi, Angela.
Hi, Graham. Thank you. You're doing great so far. It's lovely. And can I just offer a quick thanks to Ella? Her section was very informative and beautifully presented. So thank you. To the rest of you, good evening. Thank you for attending our second virtual Change Starts Together conference. As some of you may already know, I'm Angela Durnan. I'm the EH board sponsor for ED&I. And this evening, I'm really looking forward to sharing some of our plans and intentions with you. I am joined, as you've already been told, by some of our very engaged and talented ED&I advisory group. They have been absolutely wonderful in not only their oversight and advice today, but also, as you are hearing on this conference, in bringing their own experiences to the forefront of our discussions. And really that was the intention of this group, was that, we carefully selected people who really lived and breathed this stuff, and it has just been absolutely invaluable. As such, we think it's appropriate that they be the ones to bring the new ED&I framework to you all. Since we met in November, the team at England Hockey have been busy developing the framework, which will form a large part of this evening's discussion. I just want to talk about the language around framework, so we can talk about action plans and things like that, but we don't, an action plan feels like once you've done it, it's finished. And we really want this to be embedded for a long time in hockey. And it's, I'll talk later about our timeline for what we're discussing tonight, but really it's not once and done, it's once and then what's next, and how can we continue to involve. So we will always refer to this ED&I framework. And to help contextualize, what we're trying to do, I wanted to just give you a brief overview of how we got to the framework and why we think it's not only vital, but also we're really hopeful that it will resonate with and beyond our hockey community. When we reflected on the results of the More Inclusive Sports Survey, and indeed your comments and questions and feedback from the conference in November, which I'll also offer my thanks, we asked ourselves, what does excellence in ED&I look like for hockey? What is it we're trying to achieve by all these different initiatives? And we already had a list of actions and we wanted to get them done, but the framework highlights how they combine to really achieve the shift we want to see in hockey. And from the question about what we're trying to do, we concluded on 4 key outcomes that really form, I guess, that everything that we want to see happen across our sport. The first of these, which I'll talk to a little bit later, I get 2 slots, is reflect. So we want our hockey community to reflect today's society and for hockey to be relevant to everyone. We want people to see role models they can identify with in our national teams, and we want clubs and areas and leagues to experience an enriched and diverse hockey community with all the added benefits that we know that will bring. The second outcome that we had is culture. We want all of the people who play, coach, umpire, follow, or involved in hockey in any way to feel valued and welcome in our sport. We can do this by ensuring a safe, respectful, and inclusive culture throughout everything that we do. And thirdly, we want to ensure that everyone has access to get involved. You know, it's come up time and time again, and concerns regarding access to hockey have been clear, particularly with respect to state schools offering hockey. And we want to change this to ensure that everybody has the chance to get involved. And finally, whilst we can do everything to ensure those in the sport have an inclusive, enriched experience, we also seek to ensure that the reputation of hockey is regarded as excellent in its commitment to ED&I. So the framework builds on each of these outcomes with tangible and demonstrable actions aimed at realising all of these ambitions. It's not an action plan, which once complete will be done. It is a step on the journey to enhance our sport. And it's not something that England Hockey will do. Rather, it's a framework to engage us all in ensuring our sport is actively engaged and accountable for delivering all of these outcomes. I also want to emphasise that we do know the hockey experience differs throughout England. This framework and the engagement with it allows for that, encouraging different approaches throughout the country to better engage with societal groups that are not currently participating in local areas. Our proposed timeframe is 3 years. However, throughout that, we will continually assess and review our performance to determine whether the actions we've chosen are actually resulting in the change we want to see. And if they aren't, we'll absolutely commit to changing them and making them better and stronger and more ambitious. So that's how we got to our framework. I'm going to talk to the first outcome, which is about reflecting society and being relevant. For me, I guess the benefits of relevance and representation permeate clubs, competitions, talent structures, national teams. It's not only from a participation perspective, i.e. the more people we have involved. I like to think the more diverse our population, in reality, it's about ensuring that different perspectives are always considered. It's about delivering our commitment to public health, both physical and mental. And if the pandemic and early lockdowns taught us anything, it was that exercise and importantly team sport is a huge part of our own happiness and fulfillment. Graham, I'm going to bring you in on this conversation because I think people probably get bored of the sound of my voice. So, so I'm just going to welcome you into my discussion with myself.
No, absolutely. I know it's fascinating. I mean, how are you feeling about how far we've come? Do you feel good about where we are, and do you feel good about where we're going?
You know, my own experiences of hockey have been pretty good, right? But you know, I was first to admit in November, I've had the sort of natural path through, you know, the independent girls' school that only played hockey. But I think one of the things that we've realised is, and even in listening to you guys tonight, is we do have quite a long way to go. There's still things to be done. You know, the question is, do we know exactly where we want to be and where we are? I think anecdotally, we know that we've got change in lots of aspects to deliver, but I think, you know, we're first to admit our data is incomplete. And I saw a question earlier about, you know, what data do we need to get? One of the first actions attached to this outcome is that we generate a reliable and consistent baseline across our desired participation demographic. You know, our ability to make a difference is completely underpinned by having robust knowledge of where we are and where we want to be. Otherwise, where are we moving from and to? And you know, our intentions extend far beyond ethnicity, sexuality. You know, I'm not diminishing the importance of any of these, but we want to push hockey to the forefront in all aspects of diversity. And you know, loud and clear, we hear it's really relevant in state schools, which, you know, have taken a real beating in terms of their sport, provision over many years, most of my educational years actually. So we think state schools will form a huge part of the solution to accessibility, and we do have a long way to go.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, do you I always find this a tough question when I get about, what does success look like? And I think it could be quantified in a number of ways. And by the way, I love what you said about data, and the data questions are amazing, because what gets measured gets done. We talk about that a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think everyone can be thinking about that in their club, like what data are you collecting? Where is it going? And what are we learning from it and what are we gleaning from it? But as we then kind of come on to think about, how will we know when we've succeeded? And I actually think that I don't think our work will ever be done. I think that we're going to be on this constant journey, and it's just about, I think, as long as we're moving forward, then we're moving in the right direction. And I think then what seems to happen in this space is, are we moving fast enough? Are we moving in the right areas? And I think that's what will be interesting about the start of this framework, and where we've identified where we need to start. And I'm sure that many things, there might be reviews which happen along the way, and there'll be feedback, and there'll be more data that comes in. There might be pivots, but is there anything else you have in terms of your perspective, in terms of what success looks like for you personally?
Yeah. I think we took a draft of the framework to the last board meeting, which we actually got to do in person, which was lovely. And we, at board level, we had a long discussion about data, and we're continually told there's lots of data, but actually, how do we get it into a format that we can really use it and really believe it? I think what I'm here to emphasize is, we're really committed to actively monitoring it and reviewing it. We need to recognize our collective responsibility in collecting it, and using that to monitor both progress and quite frankly, the impact we're having on the demographics that we're trying to prioritize. We're committing to being open and sharing progress within the confines of privacy and GDPR and all the other juicy laws that sit around our personal data. But we need to ensure that everyone, we need to hold ourselves accountable and ensure that everyone sort of nationally and locally can make informed plans and decisions based on the data that we're able to provide. I think the most important aspect of this outcome, which you yourself pointed out in an advisory meeting, is it will be the measure of success of the other outcomes we're about to talk about. If we're successful in our desire to create a more inclusive culture, and our goals to improve accessibility are achieved, and reputationally people truly understand exactly how excellent we are at this, then the results that we see coming through this outcome will substantiate that success. So it's kind of like the roof of the house with the pillars underneath it, as someone very smart described about a month ago. But overall, and I think I'm probably fairly simplistic about it, I think success will feel and look different to how we are today. I think we'll all be able to recognize ourselves in our sport, and the data will support and recognize our efforts, but alongside that, we will see a more diverse presentation of hockey nationally.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Angela. And again, a lot of people on the phone will be thinking about what this means for their club. And again, it's about just proving, how do you move it forward where you are? Again, meet yourself where you are, and then go on this journey with us. But ultimately, some people will be starting in different places, and that's okay too.
Absolutely.
Let's just all bear that in mind, and hold hands. And again, I think sometimes the data questions can be quite tricky, and what on earth is GDPR? So what we will say, again, I don't mean to pile on work for poor Alison, the Wizard of Oz here, but if there are questions on data specifically, I know that can be a tough area. So do just get in touch with England Hockey at the website, and whatever help you need, because that data collection and what we therefore do with it is a key part of making this section sing. So, but with that said, Angela, I think we will go on to talk about a few more of the other pillars.
Thank you. Good luck.
We'll go on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to welcome Dom to look at outcome 2, ensuring inclusive cultures. So Dom, looking for a killer introduction from yourself, and then we'll let you take it away.
Thanks very much, Graham. Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. My name is Dr. Dominic Conmacode, and I'm here to talk about the second outcome, really, of the ED&I framework, really building on all the positive messages that have come already in tonight's conference. And yeah, I'm going to go into some detail about inclusive cultures and what that might look like, and hopefully what it will look like after the ED&I framework is implemented and worked on as well. So I've always been a big advocate of sort of outlining what something means, so everyone's on the same page. And I think that's particularly important with a word such as culture, which can so often be a buzzword within sport, particularly over the past few months. If we look at stories in elite sport, the word culture is thrown about, but often people maybe don't take time to think about what that actually means. So culture, quite simply, can be considered the sum of the shared values, assumptions, norms, and beliefs amongst members of an organisation. Again, simply the ways in which people respond to each other and their environment, and the ways that may respond to challenges or issues within their environment and their organisation. And a phrase that came up multiple times really in the advisory group meetings when speaking about culture and what it really means in practice is this notion that culture is the behaviour you walk past. So this was quite a popular term in the advisory group meetings because it really encapsulates how we ultimately want a strong, inclusive culture within England hockey and the sport as a whole that is normative and almost taken for granted as well. What culture is England hockey hoping to build with this ED&I framework within the organisation of EH itself and the sport as a whole? Really a strong and inclusive culture where everyone's voice is listened to and acted on, and a sport, again, echoing the sentiments that have already come before me tonight, a sport where people feel they belong, they're valued and supported in their experiences at all levels of the sport, across different talent systems, across different experiences too, and different environments as well. And then a culture really that is both contained and is underpinned by practices, processes and policies which meets the needs of a contemporary and increasingly diverse sport as well. Why is a strong inclusive culture something that is featured so prominently in the ED&I framework? Well, as has been referred to again already tonight, a strong inclusive culture enables people to bring their whole selves to an organisation and a sport. So really allows people to express themselves fully, to express their whole identities as well, which is something obviously that we really want within hockey and should be part and parcel of people's experiences within sport as a whole. Strong and inclusive cultures, we want one that can produce open and constructive dialogue, where people are aware of the positive behaviours and actions that are involved in a strong and inclusive culture, but also a place where people feel comfortable in raising issues or challenges that they have, knowing they'll be listened to and acted on as well. And then really, again, I think this point came up in the video that Hollie spoke on at the start of tonight's conference, is the idea of strength in diversity as well. So a strong and inclusive culture that sees and promotes the value of difference and sees difference as a source of new ideas, new thinking and creativity as well. So ultimately, these are the things that we'd like the advisor group, we envisage being part and parcel of a culture within the sport of hockey. So that's that slide done, Graham, if you mind flicking to the next one. So a big part of driving cultural change and producing, ultimately creating and reinforcing a strong and inclusive culture is that idea of leadership from the top as well. So really, this slide's focusing on England hockey as an organisation as well, who we feel we can see as a driver of culture throughout the sport as well. So the ED&I framework contains a range of initiatives that we feel embody and will further engender positive behaviour, which underpin a strong and inclusive culture. There's a range of initiatives in the ED&I framework that we really feel promotes the values and positive behaviour, and ultimately will be the action that we want to be taken to work and build towards a strong and inclusive culture. So as I said, the ED&I framework details how England hockey will support positive behaviour, with training, codes and guidance. And although we want leadership from the top in this, we really see England hockey not as an opposer, as an organisation that imposes a culture on the sport as a whole, but really can be seen as a guiding light and a source of guidance and support in building and maintaining a strong and inclusive culture throughout the sport as a whole. That we feel will enable people from all backgrounds and identities to feel comfortable and supported. So those initiatives I mentioned, they can really be broken down into what can be called surface and deeper level initiatives. So those more surface level initiatives included in the ED&I framework refer to initiatives designed to diversify organisations in regards to things like demographic characteristics, such as gender, ethnicity or disability. So specific examples are open, transparent and formal recruitment practices are included as sub-actions in the ED&I framework. Now, these are recruitment practices that could be through advertisement of vacancies through a more diverse range of recruitment methods. So specifically highlighting those groups that have historically and traditionally been underrepresented in the England hockey workforce. And related to that as well, another service level initiative included in there is the development of positive action opportunities to staff. So trying to encourage and enhance the career mobility of staff from different groups within the England hockey organisation. Some of those deeper level initiatives that I refer to really are designed to focus on and engage with individual meanings and attitudes that people have towards equality and diversity and inclusion. So really these two surface and deep level initiatives going hand in hand together. So some of those deeper level initiatives could be and are written down the ED&I framework, providing equality, diversity and inclusion training to every staff member and contracted worker at England Hockey, and also creating ED&I objectives, specific objectives for every staff member. So really enhancing both individual and an organisational buy-in to the culture, the strong and inclusive culture that the ED&I framework is seeking to create throughout the sport as a whole as well. So if you might go into the next slide, Graham, that'd be great. So obviously the sport of hockey is a lot bigger than the organisation of England Hockey. So really the ED&I framework is designed to support and train, provide support and training, for people in hockey in order to create and continue in some areas where strong inclusive continues already exist across the sport as well. So really want to support the sport as a whole to create a sense of a belonging and buy-in throughout the sport too. So people within the sport at all levels feel like this is a sport with a strong inclusive culture that they personally feel like they belong to as well, and feels like a sport that values them too. And within that as well, as I said in the previous slide, getting away from the idea that a strong and inclusive culture is something, yes, can be led from the top, but isn't something that's purely imposed from the top as well. So really, I think embodied in the ED&I framework is that idea of collaboration between members as well. So specifically, for example, promoting the work of clubs who are demonstrably engaged with the local community, getting across that idea of best practice and clubs learning from clubs, and championing the strong work that is already undertaken in the sport as well. So as I said, learning from the already existing strong cultures that do exist in different areas and different levels of the sport too as well. So again, top-down leadership, but really in collaboration with all levels of the sport to create this strong and inclusive culture. So yeah, ready for the next slide. And again, I think as mentioned by Angela in the previous outcome there, getting across this idea that culture and all the outcomes in the framework is something that requires long-term work to produce the changes that the ED&I framework wants to essentially build towards as well. So as part of this, there will be ongoing assessment of how the initiatives and the guidance and support around creating a strong and inclusive culture included in the ED&I framework, how that is assessed, an ongoing assessment of how that culture is produced as well. So part of that involves seeking and listening to a range of views from members, players, helpers, officials, both locally and nationally across the talent system and different environments and experiences in the sport. Really want to encourage the notion of safe, open and independent communication too. So people feel like their voice is really heard as well, and not heard, but listened to and ultimately acted on as well. And particularly within that as well, I think the ED&I framework really gets across the importance of listening to seldom heard voices in the sport as well. The framework really sees and positions personal voices as providing the most powerful and insightful meanings into the current culture of the sport and people's meanings around what a strong and inclusive culture is as well. So really want to target those seldom heard voices that perhaps may have been traditionally marginalised or silenced within the sport as a whole previously. And ultimately, this feedback is there to create a sport that's friendly, fun and engaging. Obviously, the whole point of this ED&I framework is to create a sport where everyone involved in the sport and who would like to take part in the sport feels the sport values them and feels like they are valued by the sport too. So and a sport they value themselves, sorry. So we want to create a sport that people want to stay involved in, get involved with as well. So ultimately, culture, something that wants to be created, but there will be an ongoing assessment to check that people recognise and identify and value what the culture is in the sport as well. So yeah, just go to the final slide, that'd be great. Thanks, Graham. So my last remarks about the outcome 2 of the ED&I framework, really just building on what I said in the previous slide, essentially, that a strong and inclusive culture aren't things that just happen on their own, don't just spring out of nowhere as if by magic. They do take work in order to become embedded, and as we said, in order to become the behaviour that you walk past, has to be consistent work, consistent assessment and evaluation with the sport, engaging with the sport to ensure that everyone really is recognising and feels part of the strong and inclusive culture that ultimately we want to create and keep reinforcing as well. I think the ED&I framework really reflects the work that this will take place and the vigour and passion that England Hockey and us as advisory group members, and I'm sure everyone throughout the sport, really wants to take in terms of addressing that culture and producing a strong inclusive culture that everyone wants to ultimately be part of as well. So that's all I've got to say really there, Graham, on culture. I think I'm just about the end of my time. Sorry for running over a little bit, so I'll pass back to you and I'll stop talking now.
Not at all. That was fantastic. Well, thank you. I mean, culture is so important, you know, and it's something that everyone, it's a good one because it's one that everyone can play a part in from the outset, you know, and I think I go all the way back to what Hollie said in her first video about stamping, you know, certain things. I mean, that just be one example where we can create a culture which is much more inclusive, you know, and everyone can play a role there. And I love some of the additional points you put in here. And of course, a lot more of the context will be in the framework when it's released. So thank you very much, Dom. We will we'll move on to our third outcome. I'm going to welcome both Sarah and James onto video, and I think we're going to have a bit more of a discussion for this one, but we're going to be looking at opening up access across the game. But before we do, Sarah, I do love an introduction, and I'm sure many people will know who you are, but can we get some introductions from Sarah and James, please, and then we'll roll in.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Graham. Yeah, I'm Sarah Evans. I recently retired from the GB women's hockey team. So it was definitely, when Hollie was speaking proudly about the work that we did as a squad out in Tokyo, for her to be able to wear the rainbow armband and for the girls to take the knee, was definitely proud to be a part of that. And I'm also the captain, Surbiton ladies ones, and part of the advisory group along with these amazing other panelists on here tonight. So yeah, really looking forward to chatting about this and putting this framework together.
Hi, James.
Hi, Graham. James Swanson here, formerly the manager of fan experience and membership at Harlequins, and presently the fan experience lead at Arsenal. I'm actually presenting to you live from the Emirates Stadium this evening. We have an event, so live at a sports venue. Very thankful at my time at Harlequins to lead on a lot of ED&I projects and initiatives, notably LGBTQ plus games, and also launch of a game celebrating Black History Month. I'm looking forward to bringing that experience here to Arsenal, which is at my second day in the job.
Oh, it is. So I guess we're all dying to know then, what are the snacks in the kitchen at the Emirates?
You know, actually, I would say that the facilities on site are top notch, which I'm very pleased to report. I love snacks, and we have great coffee machines, so that's all you need.
Love it, love it. Well, listen, back in the room, and good luck tonight, and thank you for joining. I know it's your second day at Arsenal. We're so grateful for you to be here, and it's been great chatting with James and meeting the rest of the team, because everyone just brings different perspective. But the fact you've been at Harlequins and been through this type of role before has been so helpful to all of us to think about how we can think about access for hockey here. So let's just dive into it. I mean, I'd love for you just to kind of open up a bit more about when we think about this pillar of access as part of our framework, like what that means to you, and what are some of the key important pillars that you would like us all to start thinking about, and that we will see in the framework itself.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was it's been brought up in the conference that we had in November as well about the importance around having state schools play hockey. The perception is, you know, that majority of the players come through the pathway that's from a private school background. So I think just really engaging state schools with the local community and getting them into clubs so that we can be able to play from that point of view. And I think Dom mentioned earlier, just in that his slide around also just shining the light on the best practice, because some of the amazing work is already going on. Clubs like Spencer Links and my club at Surbiton have that work in their local community, and it's being able to join that up and share those practices so that everyone around the country can also feel confident and have a framework so they can also do that within their own area. So I think definitely the state school engagement is one of a really important part of this outcome.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Sarah said, and I think from a state school standpoint, I think that needs to be sort of more ingrained, focused, and the purposeful investment in that space. I know that there's the school games, which is run by the Youth Sport Trust, and there's over 9,000 teams that participate in that event. And I know that from looking at the stats from an England hockey standpoint, 285 clubs have connections at those schools, but equally there's 800 England hockey clubs. So there's a disconnect there, and there's some real opportunities for clubs within the England hockey framework to engage with those schools and to sort of broaden the meaning of access there and make sure that hockey is brought to that wider population piece. So it's important to look at those opportunities when they present themselves and to find those connections to make sure that the sport is brought to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Love that. And I think about, I went to state school, but it's funny. I mean, I was at the state school where boys weren't allowed to play hockey. And I feel when we think about access, I was a very north of Scotland, and there was one AstroTurf pitch within 100 miles. And I guess because the RAF Lossiemouth provided access to the local kids to form a club, that's the only reason that I kind of got into the sport. So again, I think about other partnership opportunities around us broader than our clubs, than of our schools and things, where we might have opportunities to broaden up access. But I think the state school one, I want us to stay on that for a second, because this was something that came through strongly, and a lot of people who will be on the call have contributed to the survey last year, and we heard loud and clear that one of the key areas that the majority of people would like us to look at is, let's just call a spade, the imbalance of state school and private school opportunities, if we can call it that. So do you get a sense of, you both got such different perspectives from the elite angle and also from another different sport. Where do you think we should be starting? And is there things that the clubs should be thinking about specifically to start to enable this turnaround with them bringing more state school opportunity?
Yeah, as well, I think one of the important things, exactly like you said, if there's lack of facilities at state schools, I think potentially why it's come through a private school pathway is obviously private schools predominantly have more access to more state-of-the-art pitches or specialist coaching. And I think it's maybe just flipping it or changing our thinking around that, and actually just saying we can play hockey on any surface. Let's be creative. Let's find ways to be able to play the sport on the tarmac that you have in your school playground, or just being able to take hockey into any school and every school so that everyone has the opportunity to play, exactly like everyone has been saying before. And so, and then once we've got those sort of basic skills, then it's linking into those clubs. So just understanding your local community, what the schools are in that area, how potentially the clubs could run sessions in there. I know that there's loads of funding that's available to go into, especially primary schools, just to be able to give taster sessions and then have that school linked within that local club. So then if the kids love it, they can carry on and have that real specialist coaching from the club system, because exactly that in the talent pathway, you don't want to have certain demographic of the population having more opportunities than others because they have access to specialist coaching, to better facilities. So I think it's just breaking down those barriers. And also, like it's been said before, really engaging within that community. So asking, what are the barriers that people are facing right now, and listening to that and really making sure that we're really actioning on that. And I think that's really one of the main parts of this framework, is that we're taking action and listening to what people are saying, and so then putting things in place from that point of view.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, sorry, James, on you go.
Yeah, I mean, I can only echo what Sarah has already articulated. I think that when we look at access, we sometimes look at the element, I know from an England hockey standpoint, of sort of picking up a stick, right, and thinking purely in the end of getting people onto the field, which is important. And I think the way that Sarah just mentioned about it from a surface standpoint, understanding that it doesn't have to go via the traditional avenue, but I think it's also looking at ways, and taking examples from other sports, is looking to engage people across the sort of age spectrum in different areas of the sport, whether that's volunteering, whether that's officiating, whether that's coaching, to get them engaged in the sport. I know that the LTA has done historically a good work at sort of young competition organizer courses to get young people involved into officiating, for example. So there's many ways to participate, and I think that's a broadening of the term access to understand that we want people to engage in the sport in many different ways, and whether that is competing, whether that's officiating, whether that's volunteering. But as Sarah's already said, it's presenting that opportunity and making sure that there's not a barrier there to allow them to engage in the way that they would want to.
I love that. So let's talk about that a bit more. I mean, how might we go around providing those access opportunities? Because I think sometimes what we do, we get very focused on, I think, the elite program. I think we get very focused on playing. But you just mentioned, coaching and umpiring. A friend of mine here in New York, she played college level, and then there's not really much to do after college here in the US, but went into umpiring and then went to Tokyo as an umpire. So really amazing. And, we're having Maggie tell their story in New York and US hockey about that journey for themselves and to an Olympic Games, but not as an athlete. So how do we start providing broader opportunities than just the game and the playing itself? Any thoughts on that?
I think maybe just taking it back a step as well is we actually have data around, in particular, officiating. So interesting you saying that there, Graham, that 50% of everyone who's been completing the level 1 umpiring course, 50% of those are female, but only 28% then go on to be appointed into clubs or in the league. Oh, wow. So it's just understanding where is that disconnect, why, if 50% of those that are completing the course are female, why do we not see that then translate? And I'm sure it's exactly the same in coaching. And I know from my own personal experience, from within a coaching standpoint, I've had, I was going back and thinking through my career, and I had 9 head coaches from within the England hockey pathway in just actually for England or Great Britain. And only one of those was a woman. And if you add in then assistant coaches to that, I had 17 coaches and only 3 of them were women. So it's just really understanding why that has been the way. And then exactly like James says, then having initiatives going in and then breaking down those barriers once we know why there is that disconnect, and then actually going through and taking action, because we need to close these gaps up if we really want to make it inclusive for everyone.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think a lot about what Andrew's saying, again, we come back to measurement and data, and that's going to be a critical part of this plan and how we gather it, because just what you said there, right? The fact that we even have that data and we can look at patterns that's coming from it allows us to kind of have other questions and other conversations. So certainly interesting on that kind of the umpire course that you mentioned. And anything else from you, James, in terms as we think about broader access or things we can expect to see from the framework itself?
I think what Sarah just articulated is being as data-led as you can be and understanding where those disconnects arise. And I think when the opportunities present themselves, looking at where those disconnects are and investing in research to try and understand and uncover the reasons and nuances behind them. I know from a Harlequins perspective, we engaged in research in a couple of our broader inclusion initiatives, initially focusing on the men's community game, and just last week we released some new data in relation to the women's game, which I think that the research can be applicable across many team sports, especially a sport like hockey, where there's obviously equivalent on the women's side, but equally it's a sort of similar model that England hockey could follow. And I think what I'm bringing this up on is I think there's sometimes an assumption, an element of sort of being quite complacent as viewing that an issue doesn't exist in a space. I think from a women's rugby standpoint, if I bring it into the LGBTQ plus standpoint, a very safe space for women. And as a result of that complacency of going, well, we don't need to focus on that area. We don't need to have a look at it. But this new research that was conducted with Monash University, which identified that there's still a lot of barriers in regards to language and stereotypes.
Right.
It's that we still need to delve into the nuances, and even though it is a safe space and it's high, there's good visibility in one area, doesn't mean that we don't need to unpick one of those sort of unknown challenges may be, and as the element of complacency and thinking that a place doesn't need any further investment. And the way to do that is via, as I said, being data-led, as Sarah's already articulated, but also engaging in some meaningful research. And I think we can take some great examples from other sports in the way that they've gone about that process.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think we've always got to challenge our assumptions, don't we? Just because, again, let's put stereotypes. We'll see more lesbians playing in the female sport than we do gay men playing in the main sport. Doesn't mean there's not challenges left and right. So again, I think I love that. I love that point, James. So one, we talk about access. We talked a little bit about officiating and going beyond just the pitch. What about the fans and fan engagement? So what more can we be doing there from an access point of view?
James, do you want to take this one as you're the...
Because you're at Emirates right now, so you can start with that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things you can do. I think that on one level, you can launch initiatives. Again, I'll move back to the sort of launch of and the rise, especially outside of the US and North American market, of LGBTQ plus pride games, or games holistically themed to support and provide visibility for certain causes within the ED&I framework. So I think that's one way to engage fandom, to sort of start a meaningful dialogue with your fans and to sort of promote the fact that your venue, your space, your sport is safe for people from all identities and communities. So I think that's one particular way. Secondly, sort of establishing or supporting the construction of specific supporter groups. I know from moving back again from a Harlequin standpoint, the launch of Quins Pride, rugby's first LGBTQ plus supporters group. We see it a lot in football. And I know that the Gay Gooners, it does a particularly fantastic work working with Arsenal and their wider communities to engage at the spectrum of their audience. Again, bringing it back into, and then again, looking at specific initiatives where there's particularly underrepresentation. I know that Arsenal literally on Saturday for their game in support of LGBTQ plus History Month launched an initiative whereby they were encouraging fans to bring people who've maybe not engaged in football previously, and for particularly underrepresented people within the spectrum, non-binary people and trans people as well, to bring them into a box and to make sure that that was a safe environment in a space that typically they haven't felt represented. And to sort of, as I introduce the sport in that type of way. And those are very targeted initiatives designed to create a positive experience and to emphasize that this is a sport for everyone. So those are sort of 3 examples in regards to visibility, sort of active engagement, and very purposeful inclusion practices from a fan engagement standpoint, which I think that hockey can sort of look at and utilize in the future.
Yeah, as well, and that's brilliant, and those initiatives sound incredible. And I think as well, just geographical location of where we're engaging with our fans. I know that and the technology that we now have available is fantastic, and then just the success of the game that was at the Stoop was just brilliant. And I know obviously that was still down south and in London, but even just being slightly further west, I know I had a conversation with some fans coming from Wales who were just really happy that they could come to the game because it was just slightly closer. So I know that England Hockey have the ambition that potentially in the future we can use that technology and take it around the country so that we're engaging with the north of England. I know that the game in Durham, so there's really exciting things coming forward that we can utilize this technology around the UK. So I think that hopefully that can help us with this fan engagement as well.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you both so much. And good luck for the game, James, I think, wherever you're playing, good luck. And thank you both. There's one more pillar that we still need to talk about. So I will thank you, and we'll move on to chat about the 4th and final before we head to kind of closing comments. So lots more to come and opening up access across the game, and hopefully that started some thoughts for you all. But what we'll do now is we'll move on to our final outcome. And I will welcome Nigel to the floor. And I think that's what was top. Did we say that is a Southgate top?
Yes, that is. Hi, Graham, and a very good evening to you all. My name is Nigel, pronoun he, him, and I'm honoured to have this opportunity to present to you on Framework Outcome 4, being accountable for our reputation and ensuring that hockey is regarded as excellent in its commitment to ED&I. I'm going to be looking at some of the actions that the advisory group have been considering to improve this for England hockey going forward. And just by way of brief background, I'm a current hockey player, and yes, it's hopefully my stash. It is my playing club hockey for Southgate Hockey Club, and most recently for the East of England Masters representative side. I just want to start off by just confirming, what do we mean by reputation? And that is really the opinion that people in general have about someone or something, or how much respect or admiration someone or something receives based on past behaviour or character. Now, poor reputation will quickly lead to a lack of credibility. So no matter what good work is being undertaken by the England hockey staff, players, the advisory group, or you out in the clubs, this will all be in vain if the reputation of England hockey is poor. Now, I've got up on the slide here a quote from Benjamin Franklin. It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only a bad one to lose it. And it's just a reminder that it does take time to build a reputation, but even the very best of reputations can be lost very quickly. Now, together, we're on this journey of education and action within the ED&I space. And I urge a spirit of collaboration between us all to underpin everything we do going forward. And you, the attendees on this conference, hockey players, fans, umpires, coaches, parents, and those who are passionate about ED&I and sport generally, will appreciate that how you feel about not just hockey, but how England hockey progresses in this journey is absolutely essential to not only your enjoyment of the game, but also your perception of the reputation of England hockey generally, and ultimately your willingness to continue to engage and encourage your friends and family to join in too. But what about the perception of England hockey to those who are not yet involved and want to become part of this great game? And also the perception of where England hockey sits as a governing body alongside its sporting counterparts. It is important that England hockey is recognised universally as a safe space for those from all backgrounds to join, and is also a leader in the ED&I space. There's also a key role for you as ambassadors at your local clubs to be supportive and visible here. And this change requires everyone within the hockey community to work together. And to do that, you must be clear of England hockey's intentions and be fully behind the fact that the advisory group and England hockey, we're making these changes to better our sports. And I'm conscious that I've used the word perception, reputation a few times already, but I must stress that underpinning this, England hockey and the advisory group totally get that there needs to be demonstrable evidence to show real change. And that journey begins now. England hockey has committed to strengthen its communications around ED&I, and crucially will also help clubs and other organisations to tell their own story and promote the good work that we know is already taking place. England hockey will hold itself and the sport accountable on progress and will look to sign up to independent external assessment processes, and also benchmark itself against other sports and similar organisations. Now, that said, England hockey do not hold a silver bullet, and we will need you, the hockey community, support. And then England hockey will need to be clear as to what their remit is, and well, they'll need the support from you. So what does this mean in terms of more specific actions? We've got up on the screen here. The first one, benchmark ourselves against other sports and sectors. Now, some of the broad themes that the advisory group have been thinking about in terms of how you demonstrate benchmarking yourselves against sports and other sectors is by England hockey looking at external frameworks such as the Code for Sports Governance, looking potentially to submit demographic data to sector scrutiny, and also measure themselves against other sports, as well as other organisations who are leading the way in ED&I. The second bullet here, promote our game in new ways and to new audiences through our events, strategy and communications review. Some of the things that the advisory group have been thinking about in terms of supporting this here, reviewing the way that England hockey communicates within our game and promotes the sports, that when England hockey promotes the sports, it will use diverse images and show a true range of people who are involved and taking part. And for me, looking at how the England hockey website, to take an example, has evolved past 12 to 18 months, I think it's a lot more diverse in how it represents the participants in the sport. I think there's more that can be done, but I think it's a great start. Also looking to develop opportunities for a wider range of people to create and provide those images I've just mentioned through open competitions. And also, Sarah and James touched on just now the last session about international player engagement and maybe how to engage local communities. And there's a great opportunity this year, the Commonwealth Games being in Birmingham, and also the match up in Durham later this year. Similarly, by looking at live stream broadcasts, what percentage split is there across formats and age groups? And finally, considering people who haven't been to a major hockey event and people who want to go to local venues, what would make hockey appealing to them? So together, let's make hockey a safe space. I just want to thank you all for joining today, and I'll hand back to Graham. Thanks, Graham.
Amazing, Nigel. Thank you. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? And I work in advertising, so I spend a lot of my time talking about reputation with clients and trying to get you all to buy things you don't need. And it's fascinating because your point in the beginning about one mistake and it's all done. But I mean, I'm not sure if it's possible if people at home, if you think there's a word which almost captures what we think the reputation of hockey is, I'd love you to put it in the chat or share it, because I think it'd be interesting. Because I think across the country it might differ. That's just something I think we've got to continuously work on. I loved what you said as well about where we could benchmark. Is there any particular sports that you've been super impressed with? I'll start. I mean, for me, swimming have done an amazing job with their fancy lights. I'm not sure if you've seen some of the kind of international swim meet. It's really remarkable the way that fans are packing out stadiums to watch swimming. Anything else that you've seen or that's inspired you?
I think netball, actually. I think netball's been a really great example about how it's promoted itself as a sport. It's really accessible and very visible as well. We talked about visibility a lot throughout the conference tonight, and I think netball is increasingly visible. And it's engaging with a whole range of fans and bringing new people into the sport. That's something we can learn from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nigel. And again, reputation it's for all of us. I think we all play a key part in that as those that play hockey or coach or officiate. We're all in this together. So again, we can all contribute to this as well. And I know from a marketing perspective that I'll be sitting down can't wait to meet with England Hockey Marketing and talk a bit more about how we build on reputation as part of the framework and any help that we can roll out to the clubs in the regions to help with that as well. You can be assured that I personally so committed to this one because there's a lot that can be done here, because it's important. We can't just say that we're diverse, right? There's got to be there, right? We've got to really be on top of it. And we can't just be putting logos and, pride flags up in June if we're not really walking the walk and just talking the talk. And that's all a key part of the reputation part. So thank you, Nigel, and good luck with your upcoming games this weekend and stuff. So, I'll just start by saying thank you very much to all of you. I believe there's over 140 people have joined today, which I think that's honestly remarkable. I know it's just the second time we've done Change Starts together, but the fact that 140 have given up your evening for an hour and a half, you've probably missed neighbours, is brilliant. And I just bear with us while we get the final full stamp and full stop on the kind of the framework, while we review your questions and keep them coming. And if you think of something tomorrow, send it in and we will get back to you, and we will get back to you quicker. That's the plan this time. So in the coming weeks, we'll be putting the full stop on all of this and it will get rolled out. And Nick, what did you think? And is there any reactions and thoughts from you today in terms of what you've heard? And I've not seen the chat or any of the vibes coming through.
Just great, and a massive thank you to all the presenters, as you've said already, Graham. In terms of some takeouts, I think there's plenty to take out, and one of the things we will commit to doing is obviously following up on some of the questions that you've referred to there, Graham, and making sure those get answered and shared. I think Ange pointed out, or was it you at the start? Apologies if it was you, Graham. We will respond pretty promptly to this, which was some of the feedback from last time. Equally, in terms of my own reflections and some of the comments that I've heard and some of the really insightful comments that have been made this evening, data is clearly really important here, Graham, and having that benchmark for us to sort of move on from. And I think, that's a commitment for all of us. It's not just the ivory tower, if that's appropriate, but I think it's for all of us to really commit towards doing that, because the better information and data that we have, the more we understand about the sport. Most importantly, Graham, the people that play and are involved in our game. I thought the questions you were asking to James and Sarah, highlighting the breadth and diversity of different roles that sit within the sport. This is not just about the talent pathway, although that is really important, and we are making some important steps in terms of that space. But it also affects officials, it affects volunteers more broadly, it affects those in club roles up and down the country. It is there. And telling the story and making it about personal stories. Sam's story was incredibly heartfelt and emotional, and beautifully delivered by Ella this evening. But for me, there are some real people that are going through issues in your own communities, in your own clubs up and down the country, and it's probably just taking a bit of time to recognize that, Graham, and intervening in the right ways is some of those reflections. And I thought your point at at one point around this is the journey, and the end. We may never get to that end because it's so important. We just keep remembering actually that there's a constant evolvement towards this, and not getting too frustrated by that, but recognizing we're all in this together. We are really committed to this, Graham, as all of you have so eloquently presented this evening on. And I'm just incredibly grateful that this is a real collaborative team effort to try and make a real difference to so many people that are involved in our sport and will be involved in our sport in the future. So those are sort of top line reflections I had, Graham.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nick. That's great. It's also just, as we think about change starts together, and I think there's some really interesting moments that we have this year as well. I think with the World Cup's coming up, from the elite level, we've got the Commonwealth Games, but we're also taking, we're heading to the north as well, to Durham. So again, I think, particularly with the Commonwealth Games, major sports events and their opportunities to impact communities, and also just to inspire people to pick up different sports, not just hockey again. So I think a lot about, what is it we can be doing now to almost prepare our programs for the end of summer, for when the Commonwealth Games are done. So should people want to get back to hockey, all those amazing things that happened after 2016, like when almost like the nation was inspired, like what is it we can do to make sure that when people are feeling inspired to get back to it, that hockey can be a destination for them. So that's just, there's just so many exciting things coming up for England hockey this year, which will be great to be part of.
Well, yeah, and hockey in England, it's for all of us collectively. Those are the opportunities that are in front of us. And yes, I thought Dom's point about top-down leadership, I thought he described that really well this evening. It's not for us to impose, but it's for us to potentially take the first step or to lead in some areas. But that collective point. But equally, there is nothing stopping any of us, taking the opportunity that's in front of us with all those activities and events you mentioned, Graham. But we've got some plans that we will share around the Commonwealth Games. We've got some plans that we'll share around World Cups. It's great that we've got the Women's World Cup in the Netherlands and Spain in July. We've got the men's in January next year. There's lots of exciting hockey related international activity, but there's also an incredible amount going on up and down the country and in clubs right across the 860 or so.
Sure. Well, listen, Nick, thank you for your comments. And again, I think we can finish up here in a second, but do you want to tell us, are we getting together in the Stoop? I think, is that the plan?
Well, we're hoping that we'll get a face-to-face, Graham, in the next sort of iteration of this. So the third Change Starts Together conference, and we'll confirm exactly when that will be. We're hoping to use one of the international series of the FIH Hockey Pro League games that we've got coming up in May or June. So we'll get those dates as soon as those are confirmed. And equally, the bit around the framework that we've talked to this evening and the 4 outcomes, Graham, will be presenting and sharing that post the AGM. So we've got the England Hockey AGM in the middle of next month, and we'll make sure that gets out and shared so that everybody can start to see what we've been talking to this evening, but also start to feedback and comment on contributions that we can all make.